In light of everything that's been happening with Siam Lee, who went missing, for those of you who are not familiar with it, she's a young girl of 20 years old, nearly 21, in April, who went missing early, like the first week of January. I think it was around about the 4th. I think it's quite pertinent to talk about how we as a society continue to fail one another. And, you know, we can't blame ourselves for choices that people make or the lives that they are not necessarily brought into by their own personal choice. But, you know, at the same time, we do need to start becoming more aware of what is going on right underneath our noses. And it's a very, I mean, prostitution is, and drugs, I mean, they've existed forever. You know, mankind has a long-standing history with those things. The sex industry, from what I've been told, is the oldest industry in the world. So, you know, it's not about okay, well, we should just do away with it completely. It's going to exist whether we you know, wanted to or not. But there's that whole long-standing argument about how can we protect people who are actually involved in it, because at this point they have no rights, really. Like, you hear about cases even with police where they turn women away if they come in to report charges of assault or rape, just because they're under the influence of alcohol. Even men also get turned away if they get themselves into trouble because, well, I don't know what the reason is. I've never been in that position, but I just hear about the lack of apathy. I mean, complete apathy and the lack of empathy with regards to people in these sorts of conditions, and it gets even worse in the sex trade. People who are in the sex trade or who are addicts are still human beings, and I don't claim to know what they are going through at all, but I just know that I knew Siam, and Siam was a wonderfully sweet girl. You would never have thought that she was involved in anything like that. You knew that there might be a little bit of a difficult background in her childhood because she was quite alternate. So, you know, you had a feeling there was something like that, but you would never say that she was involved in anything that was as scary as what's coming out in the headlines and the newspaper articles. And obviously, you know, I'm basing this video on what I've read in the newspapers, so if I've got any of the facts wrong, I apologize. But I just really think as a society we need to start waking up. We need to start, you know, embracing the gift of humanity that we've got, applying humility to circumstances. Yes, it's a dog-eat-dog world. We all need to help each other to a degree. Like, you've got to help yourself first before you can help others. But you cannot act surprised, really, if the warning signs are there and, you know, you haven't taken the time to really investigate what is happening behind the scenes. In society, we get so caught up with the whole aspect of what car do you drive, what belongings do you have, you know, do you have real gold jewelry or is it just plastic, like, is it just cosmetic jewelry? You know, status is such a big thing. Even people who have lots of money and are seeking the status still don't necessarily have class, and quite often some of the most authentic people actually lack class because they're real, you know, they're not trying to hide behind the airs and graces that society expects you to have if you are a classy person. How you carry yourself is so vital, because, you know, reputation can be completely snuffed out, like, overnight, with one bad thing happening in your life. yeah, it doesn't even have to be real, it could be a rumor. So, you know, we live in this society where we get so caught up in those details, and those details are what actually define who somebody is, when it's not the case. Like, if somebody is a prostitute, it doesn't make them any less deserving of this life. If somebody is a street sweeper, or a rubbish collector, that doesn't make them someone who deserves to be treated like rubbish. You know, if by that merit, like, I'm a clothing designer, clothing designers are perceived, if you remember Devil Wears Prada, clothing designers are perceived to be backstabbing, cutthroat, lack no depth, have superficial desires in this world, because all we care about is, you know, clothing and fashion, and it is a superficial world that we've chosen to live in. But that doesn't define who you are. In a post that I said today, a status update that I did today on the same topic, you know, your occupation doesn't maketh a man. What defines who you are is what you are doing when nobody's looking, what you're saying when nobody can hear you. You know, if you're talking about people behind their backs, it's just when you don't think you're going to get caught out, that is what defines who you are, like your behavior in those moments. The things that you do when nobody's watching. So if you go and help somebody who is in need when nobody's watching, that defines who you are, because you're not going to get applauded for that. You're doing something good, but you're not doing it because you're like, oh, look at me, I'm doing something good. So, you know, how you choose to live your life is entirely your business. But don't let your actions make anyone ever feel lesser for being alive. You know, lesser for, because that is ultimately what you're doing if you judge somebody for being a prostitute, or, you know, there were just so, my whole point of this, I mean, please go and investigate the case if you haven't seen anything about this. If you're not from South Africa, you might not know about this case. But my whole point is, you are not given a birthright to define who somebody is by their occupation. You are not given the birthright to label somebody as lesser than you just because they don't have money. Yeah, I think there's a lot of awareness and awakening coming from this case. I think that it's something that people really needed to shift in their minds. I'm grateful for the people who were able to turn their viewpoint in a different direction, where they may previously have judged somebody for being a prostitute, and actually seeing the innocence and vulnerability and the victimhood of Siam. And so often the choices that where people choose to go into this industry are made out of desperation and necessity. I don't know what her reasoning is. The case hasn't unfolded enough for me to actually comment. But the point being is, people deserve to be treated like equals from the start. The only time that people don't deserve to be treated like an equal is if they choose to treat others lesser than themselves. You can't own people, you can't dominate people, and you can't tell people, you know, who they are when you probably don't even know who you are. I hope this resonates with you, and I hope you can take something constructive out of this and go out today and make somebody feel like they mean the world, even though you may only know them for a New York minute. Okay, bye.